A single dad just wanted to teach his son a simple lesson about respect. But when he started picking up trash left by others in the park, he never expected the mysterious woman watching from the high-rise apartment above would change his life forever. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching? From the late afternoon sun cast long golden stripes across the park grass, dappled and warm. Leo sat on the edge of a worn wooden bench, his back to the gleaming high-rise that bordered the park's eastern edge. His boots were scuffed at the toes, the leather cracked from years of kneeling in dirt and mulch. But they were clean, his hands calloused and etched with faint lines of soil that never quite washed away, rested on his knees. He watched his son Sam, a whirlwind of energy in a bright red hoodie, chase a soccer ball across the open field. Sam was 7, and he moved with the kind of unself-conscious joy that made Leo's chest ache in the best way possible. The ball skidded to a stop near a cluster of rose bushes, and Sam flopped onto the grass, his laughter echoing in the quiet air. This was their ritual every day after school. If the weather held, they came here to this small patch of green nestled between city blocks. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, a place where the noise of Leo's life, the unpaid bills, the rattling engine in his truck, the quiet hum of loneliness in his empty apartment could fade for an hour or two. He pulled a brown paper bag from the backpack. At his feet, inside were 2 apples and a couple of peanut butter sandwiches on bread that was starting to go stale. He'd made them that morning before heading out for a long day of trimming hedges and pulling weeds. For clients who barely looked him in the eye, he called out to Sam, his voice carrying easily across the field, "Time for a fuel stop, champ." Sam scrambled up, his face flushed, and his hair sticking to his forehead with sweat. He collapsed onto the bench beside his dad, grabbing a sandwich with a triumphant grin. "Thanks, Dad," he said, his mouth already full. Leo just smiled, ruffling his hair. They ate in comfortable silence, the way they always did, a family of 2 who had learned to fill the empty spaces with shared looks and easy rhythms. A group of teenagers drifted past them, their laughter loud and sharp against the gentle backdrop of the park. They tossed empty chip bags and soda cans onto the grass near the trash can, not in it, before disappearing down the path. Without a second glance, Leo watched them go, a familiar knot of frustration tightening in his chest. He didn't say anything at first, just finished his apple and set the core neatly back in the bag. But then he stood up and started walking toward the mess. Sam looked up, confused. "What are you doing, Dad?" Leo bent down and picked up a crushed can. "Just leaving the place a little better than we found it," he said quietly. "It's not our mess," Sam said, stating the obvious. Leo tossed the can into the bin with a soft thud. "Doesn't matter." "It's our park though, right?" He kept working, picking up wrappers, a plastic bottle, a discarded napkin, each piece of trash, a small act of defiance against the carelessness of the world. It was a lesson he'd tried to teach Sam since his wife passed, that you couldn't always control what life threw at you. But you could control how you cleaned it up from a floor-to-ceiling window 27 stories above. Clara Vance watched the scene unfold. She stood with a half-empty glass of sparkling water in her hand, the ice cubes melting untouched. Her apartment was a testament to minimalist luxury. Clean lines, muted colors, and a silence so profound it felt like a presence of its own. She saw the man stand up, she saw him start picking up the trash that wasn't his, and she felt something stir inside her, something unfamiliar and sharp. It wasn't pity. It was something closer to awe. She watched him and his son, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel like she was looking down from a tower. She felt like she was looking in from the outside. Clara lowered the blinds just enough to soften the glare of the setting sun. Her hand steady, but her thoughts were anything. But she had been in this city for 6 weeks, living in a corporate-owned penthouse. She hadn't chosen a place designed to impress clients, not to be a home. The silence was the worst part, a sterile hum that amplified the emptiness she'd been running from. She had left a life of boardrooms and back-to-back meetings, a world where Every smile was a negotiation, and every handshake a contract. She had told her board she needed a sabbatical, a break to recharge, but the truth was she was hiding from the fallout of a deal, gone wrong, a betrayal, by a man she had trusted, a partner who had used her name and her connections to build his own empire on the ruins of hers. The scandal had been quieted by her father's legal team, but the whispers followed her, the pitying glances, the speculation that she wasn't strong enough to handle the pressure. She had come here to this unfamiliar city to disappear, to become anonymous, but anonymity was just another word for lonely from her window. The park was a small rectangle of life, a world away from her own. She had started watching it a few days ago, first out of boredom, then out of a strange sort of fascination. She learned the rhythms, the morning joggers, the mothers with strollers, the old men who played chess on the permanent stone tables, and then there was him, the man with the worn boots and the kind eyes who came every afternoon with his son. They were a constant, a small island of warmth in the sprawling green. She didn't know his name, but she knew the way he knelt to tie his son's shoe, the way his shoulders relaxed when the boy laughed, the way he always packed up their own trash, and sometimes the trash of others. Today was different. Today she felt a pull, a quiet urge to do something more than just watch the man finished cleaning up, and walked back to the bench where his son was now trying to balance the soccer ball on his head. The boy wobbled, then lost control. The ball shot sideways, rolling down the gentle slope of the hill, straight toward the iron fence that bordered the park's edge. It bounced off a post and disappeared into the thick manicured hedges that separated the public space from the private entrance of her building. Leo sighed and started to jog after it. But Clara was already moving. She slipped on a pair of simple flats, grabbed a light cashmere cardigan, and headed for the elevator. She didn't know what she was going to say. She just knew she couldn't stay inside her glass tower for one more minute by the time she reached the private gate that led into the park. Leo was on the other side, peering through the bars, his brow furrowed in frustration. The ball was nestled deep in the shrubbery just out of his reach. She walked toward him, her heart beating a little too fast. "Excuse me," she said, her voice softer than she intended. He turned startled. His eyes, a clear, startling blue, met hers. She felt a jolt, a recognition of something she couldn't name. "I think you're looking for this," she said. And with a grace she didn't know she possessed, she reached into the bushes and retrieved the ball. Leo stared at her for a beat longer than was probably polite. She stood on the other side of the black iron gate, holding his son's soccer ball. Her hair was tied back in a simple knot, but a few loose strands framed a face that was both elegant and tired. Her clothes were simple, a plain gray t-shirt and dark jeans, but they hung on her with an understated quality that spoke of money, more than any logo could. He couldn't place her. He had seen most of the people who lived in the towering glass building next to the park. They were a blur of sharp suits and hurried phone calls, women with tiny dogs and expensive sunglasses. This woman was different. She had a stillness about her, a quiet watchfulness that felt out of place. "Thanks," he said finally, finding his voice. He reached through the bars and she passed the ball to him. Their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. The touch was light, but it sent a strange warmth through him. Sam came running up, then his face a mixture of relief and curiosity. "You found it?" Leo handed him the ball. "Yeah, this lady helped us out." Sam beamed at her. "Thank you. My dad says I have to be more careful with my powerful kicks." She laughed, a genuine soft sound that caught Leo off guard. It was a nice laugh, one that seemed to transform her face, making her look younger, less guarded. "I'm Clara," she said, extending a hand through the bars this time. Deliberately, he shook it. Her grip was firm but gentle. "Leo, and this is Sam, the soccer superstar." Sam puffed out his chest proudly. "Nice to meet you both," Clara said. Her eyes lingered on Leo for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths before she stepped back. "Well, I should let you get back to your game." Leo nodded. "Yeah, we were just about to pack it in anyway." Getting close to dinner time, the air between them was charged with a strange new energy. The gate, a physical barrier that somehow highlighted the invisible one, between their worlds, her world of private entrances and cashmere, and his of scuffed boots and peanut butter sandwiches. He should have just said thanks again and walked away. But for some reason he didn't. He found himself wanting to know more about the quiet woman with the sad eyes who had appeared out of nowhere to rescue a soccer ball. "I haven't seen you around here before," he said it coming out. More like a statement than a question. Clara's smile was small, almost shy. "I just moved in. I'm not really a park person usually," but she trailed off, glancing around at the trees and the open sky. "Maybe I should be. Well, it's a good park," Leo said, feeling awkward. For reasons he couldn't pinpoint, the swings are decent and the squirrels are surprisingly aggressive with snacks, so watch out for that. That made her laugh. Again, and the sound settled something in his chest. "You come here often." "Every day," he said without thinking. His heart, his anchor. He nodded toward Sam, who was now juggling the ball with his knees. Clara watched the boy, a soft expression on her face. "He can tell you love him," she said quietly. The observation was so direct, so personal, it threw him. "Yeah, well, he's all I've got," he replied. The words raw and honest before he could stop them. Her expression softened even more, and she nodded as if she understood something deeper than just the words themselves. "Then, you're a very lucky man," she said, and with a final small wave she turned and walked back toward the shimmering glass doors of her building. Leo watched her go, feeling the strange sense of an encounter that was both finished and just beginning. For the next few days, the park felt different. The air was charged with a new kind of anticipation. Every time Leo and Sam arrived, Leo found his eyes drifting toward the towering glass building, wondering if she was watching. He told himself it was just curiosity, a fleeting interest in the mysterious woman who had appeared and disappeared so quickly. But it was more than that. He couldn't shake the memory of her sad eyes or the sound of her quiet laughter. On the third day she was there again, not at the gate, but sitting on a bench near the duck pond, a book open on her lap. Though she didn't seem to be reading it, she wore a simple trench coat and sunglasses, but he recognized her immediately by the quiet way she held herself. A stillness in the midst of the park's gentle chaos. Sam spotted her first. "Dad, look." "It's the soccer ball lady," he said, tugging on Leo's sleeve with excitement. Leo's heart gave a strange lurch. He tried to steer Sam toward the swings on the other side of the park, but his son was already waving enthusiastically. Clara looked up, saw them, and a small hesitant smile touched her lips. She took off her sunglasses and beckoned them over. Leo felt a reluctant pull, a mix of caution and a desire he didn't want to name. They walked toward her, and the closer they got, the more he noticed the faint shadows under her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Hey, you guys," Clara said as they approached. "I was hoping I'd run into you again." Sam bounced on his toes. "Are you reading a good book?" She glanced down at the book in her lap, as if surprised to see it there. "Honestly, I haven't read a single page. I just like the quiet out here." Leo leaned against the back of the bench. "It's good for that." Clara's gaze shifted to him, her eyes searching his face. "How have you been?" he shrugged. "Good busy. You know, the usual." He ran a hand through his hair, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Under her steady gaze, she seemed to see more than he was comfortable with, to notice the things he tried to hide, the weariness in his posture, the faint worry lines around his eyes. Clara turned her attention back to Sam. "What's the plan for today? World-class soccer practice? Or are you giving the swings a workout?" Sam grinned. "Both," he said. Then he looked at her with the unfiltered honesty of a child. "Do you want to watch us?" Leo mentally cringed, but Clara didn't seem to mind. Her smile widened. "I'd love that." They spent the next hour in a strange but comfortable bubble. The three of them, Clara sat on the bench, a quiet observer, while Leo pushed Sam on the swings and cheered him on during his soccer drills. She didn't talk much, but she listened intently, her focus entirely on them. It was unnerving and strangely flattering. Leo wasn't used to being the center of anyone's attention, let alone a woman like her. as the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Leo called it a day. They walked back toward the bench where Clara was waiting. Sam chattering excitedly about a goal he'd almost scored. "Thanks for keeping an eye on us," Leo said, feeling the need to say something, anything, to fill the comfortable silence. "It was my pleasure," Clara replied, gathering her things. "I should probably head in." She stood, and for a moment they just looked at each other, a question hanging in the air, unspoken. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. "I got these the other day, and I'm not much of an artist," she said, holding them out to Sam. "I thought maybe you could put them to good use." Sam's eyes widened in awe. "Thank you." "Thank you," he said, hugging the sketchbook to his chest. Leo opened his mouth to protest, to say she didn't have to, but the look of pure joy on his son's face stopped him. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "You really didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said, her eyes meeting his over Sam's head. And in that look he saw something that wasn't pity or charity. It was something warmer, something that looked a lot like connection, and it scared him more than he cared to admit. Their encounters in the park became a quiet routine. Clara would be there most afternoons sometimes, with a book, sometimes just sitting and watching the world go by. She never pushed, never pried, just offered a warm smile and a listening ear. Leo found himself looking for her, scanning the benches as soon as they arrived. A part of him, the cautious part that had been built brick by brick after his wife's death, told him to keep his distance, but another part, a part he hadn't realized was so starved for connection, was drawn to her quiet strength and the sad wisdom in her eyes. She was good with Sam, genuinely interested in his endless stories about school dinosaurs and the intricate rules of his imaginary games. She listened with a patience that Leo rarely saw in other adults. She never talked down to him, never dismissed his childhood concerns as trivial. One afternoon she brought a bag of stale bread for the ducks, and the three of them sat on the edge of the pond, tossing pieces into the water, watching the birds squabble and chase each other. Sam was in heaven, his giggles echoing across the water. Clara laughed along with him, her face open and unguarded in the sunlight. Leo found himself watching her more than the ducks. He noticed the way a small dimple appeared next to her mouth when she smiled, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear with a graceful, almost unconscious movement. He knew he was in dangerous territory. This was more than just a casual park friendship. A feeling was taking root in his chest, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time that evening. As he was tucking Sam into bed, his son held up the sketchbook Clara had given him. It was filled with drawings of the park, the ducks, a lopsided picture of Leo, and a surprisingly accurate sketch of Clara sitting on the bench. "I like Clara," Sam said, his voice sleepy. "She's nice." "Yeah, she is," Leo agreed, his voice a little tight. "Why is she always sad, though?" The question hit Leo like a punch to the gut. He hadn't realized Sam had noticed it too. He didn't have an answer. He just smoothed the covers and kissed his son's forehead. "I don't know, champ. Maybe she's just quiet." As he walked out of the room, the question echoed in his mind. He had wondered the same thing. There was a story behind Clara's sadness, a story he had no right to ask about, but one he was beginning to realize he desperately wanted to understand. The following Saturday, the park was hosting a small community fair. The air was filled with the scent of popcorn and cotton candy, the sound of a local band playing slightly off-key folk music, and the laughter of children. Leo had promised Sam they would go. Even though he knew his budget was tight enough to snap, he had exactly $20 in his pocket, enough for a few ride tickets and maybe a shared funnel cake. If he stretched it, they were wandering. Through the crowd when they saw her, Clara was standing near a booth selling handmade quilts, looking a little lost in the sea of strollers and families. She was dressed down again in jeans and a simple cream-colored sweater, but she still stood out, a small island of elegance in the cheerful chaos. Sam ran up to her without hesitation. "Clara, you came!" he yelled. Clara's face lit up when she saw them, a genuine flash of relief and pleasure. "Hey, I didn't know if you guys would be here." Leo walked up behind Sam, feeling that familiar mix of apprehension and delight. I told him we couldn't miss the chance to overpay for a corn dog, he said with a wry smile. Clara laughed. I was just thinking the same thing about the $5 lemonade for the next hour. They moved through the fair as a trio. Clara insisted on buying the ride tickets. Despite Leo's protests, she did it with a quiet firmness that left no room for argument, saying she wanted to see Sam's face on the Ferris wheel. Leo reluctantly agreed, feeling a prickle of unease at accepting her generosity. But the look of pure, unadulterated joy on Sam's face as they soared above the park in the rickety Ferris wheel car was worth swallowing his pride for a moment. From the top of the wheel they could see the whole park laid out below them, the pond shimmering in the sun, the neat rows of trees, the glass tower where Clara lived looming in the distance. Sam pointed excitedly at all the familiar landmarks, but Leo found himself looking at Clara. Her hair was blowing in the wind, her sunglasses were pushed up on her head, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked truly carefree. Happy, the sadness in her eyes, had been replaced by a sparkle of genuine amusement. As they came to a stop at the bottom, she turned to him and said, "This is nice, isn't it?" Leo nodded, his voice a little hoarse. "Yeah, it is," later. As they sat on the grass sharing a bag of popcorn, a man in a sharp suit walked up to Clara. His face was a mask of polite urgency. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice low, "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a call you need to take." Clara's smile vanished instantly, the carefree sparkle in her eyes extinguished as if a switch had been flipped. She stood up, brushing popcorn dust from her jeans. "Excuse me for a moment," she said to Leo. Her voice suddenly formal and distant, she walked away with the man. Her posture stiffening with each step, Leo watched her go, a cold feeling creeping into his stomach. Miss Vance, he had assumed her last name was something simple, something that matched her quiet park persona. But Vance, that name, felt heavy important. He had heard it before on the news and business magazines. It was the name of one of the largest tech corporations in the country. Clara Vance, the woman who had just shared popcorn with him on a picnic blanket, was an heiress, a billionaire, and he had had no idea. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Leo felt like he was moving through a dream, a strange, unsettling one, where the ground kept shifting beneath his feet. Clara returned a few minutes later, her face composed, but her eyes were guarded again. The easy warmth from earlier was gone, replaced by a polite distance. The man in the suit hovered nearby, a silent reminder of the world she belonged to, a world that had just crashed into his. "Sorry about that," Clara said, her voice a little too bright. "Just a work thing." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Leo just nodded, not knowing what to say. The magic of the day had been shattered. The comfortable bubble they had been in had burst, leaving him feeling exposed and foolish. He had been so caught up in the easy connection he had felt with her that he had never stopped to consider who she really was. He had seen her as a kindred spirit, a fellow lonely soul. But now he saw her as what she was, a woman, from a world so far removed from his that they might as well have been from different planets. He felt a familiar wall of self-preservation rising inside him, a wall he had built to protect himself and his son from disappointment and hurt. He had let her in just a little, and now he regretted it. He had let himself believe that a woman like her could be interested in a man like him, a landscaper with calloused hands and a mountain of debt. It had been a fantasy, a dangerous one. They walked through the rest of the fair in a strained silence, the easy chatter replaced by polite but empty phrases. Sam, sensing the shift in mood, was quieter now, his earlier excitement replaced by a confused frown. When it was time to leave, Leo said, a stiff goodbye, avoiding Clara's eyes. "Thanks for the tickets," he said, his voice formal. "We should get going." Clara looked like she wanted to say something more, something to explain or apologize, but she didn't. She just watched them go, her face a mask of regret, as Leo and Sam walked away. Leo could feel her gaze on his back. He didn't turn around, he just kept walking. His son's hand held tight in his, leaving the brightly lit fantasy of the fair behind, and heading back to the stark reality of his life, where billionaires didn't fall for gardeners and happy endings were just for fairy tales. Clara stood frozen as she watched them walk away. The cheerful music of the fair suddenly sounded jarring and hollow. The man in the suit, her father's chief of staff whose name she could never remember, stood a few feet away, a silent sentinel of her other life, the life she had been trying so hard to escape. She had seen the look on Leo's face the moment the man had called her Miss Vance. It was a look of shock, followed by a slow shuddering of his features, as if a door had been slammed shut in her face. She had seen the easy warmth in his eyes curdle into cautious suspicion, and it had broken something inside her. She hadn't meant to deceive him. She had just wanted to be Clara, not Clara Vance, heiress to a tech empire. A name that opened every door but closed off every real human connection. She had been so desperate for a taste of, normally for a moment of genuine human interaction, that she had foolishly believed she could have it without revealing the truth. But the truth had a way of showing up uninvited, and now it had ruined the one good thing she had found in this lonely city. She had come to the park day after day, drawn by the quiet integrity of a man who picked up other people's trash, and the bright, unfiltered joy of his son. She had let herself believe that she could be a part of their world, even for a little while. But now she saw the foolishness of that hope. Their worlds were not just different, they were incompatible. He was a man who found joy in the simple things, a shared sandwich, a well-kicked soccer ball. She was a woman who had everything and felt nothing. He lived in a world of sun and soil. She lived in a world of glass and steel. She turned to the man in the suit, her voice cold and sharp. "Tell my father I am not available," she said. Then, without another word, she walked away, leaving him standing there amidst the laughter and the music of a life she could no longer pretend to be a part of. The following week was heavy with a silence that felt louder than any argument Leo avoided, the park telling Sam they were too busy with errands and chores. Sam didn't understand. He kept asking about Clara, about the sketchbook she had given him, about when they could go see the ducks again. Leo didn't have any good answers. He just mumbled excuses and changed the subject. The truth was, he was a coward. He was afraid of seeing her again, afraid of the awkwardness and the unspoken accusations that would hang in the air between them. He was also afraid of the small, stubborn part of him that still wanted to see her, that missed her quiet presence and the sound of her laughter. He spent his days working harder than ever, throwing himself into his landscaping jobs with a frantic energy that left him exhausted by nightfall. He trimmed hedges with a vengeance, pulled weeds with a fury, and mowed lawns with a grim determination. It was a way to numb the confusion and disappointment that gnawed at him. He replayed their last conversation at the fair over and over in his head, her formal tone, the way she had pulled away from him, the way her world of suits and urgent phone calls had so easily eclipsed the simple joy they had shared. He felt like a fool for ever believing. It could be anything more. He had let himself be charmed by a woman who was just passing through his world, a tourist in the land of the common man. She was probably back in her glass tower, laughing at the naive gardener who thought she was actually interested in him. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow, but he forced it down, telling himself it was for the best. He had his son to think about. He couldn't afford to get caught up in fantasies that would only lead to heartbreak. But at night, when Sam was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Leo would sit by the window and look out at the city lights, and his gaze would always drift to the glittering high-rise at the edge of the park. He would wonder if she was up there looking down at the world she had so briefly been a part of. He would wonder if she ever thought of him, and he would hate himself for caring. The sketchbook lay on Sam's nightstand, its pages filled with vibrant crayon drawings of trees, flowers, and a recurring stick figure with long brown hair and a kind smile. Clara's presence lingered in their small apartment, a ghost of a friendship that had ended before it had truly begun. One evening, as Leo was cleaning up the kitchen, Sam came in holding a drawing he had just finished. It was a picture of the three of them at the fair on the Ferris wheel. Sam and Leo were smiling broadly, but the figure of Clara was drawn with a sad, down-turned mouth. "Dad," Sam said, his voice small, "why is Clara sad?" He looked at the drawing, his chest tightening. He didn't know how to answer that, how to explain the complex web of money, pride, and fear that had come between them. "She's not sad," Champ Leo said, his voice a little too rough. "She just has a different life than we do, a busy life." Sam looked down at the drawing, unconvinced. "But she liked us." "I know she did." "Yeah, kiddo," Leo said, his voice softening. "I think she did too." The simple honesty of his son's words was a gut punch. He had been so focused on his own hurt and pride that he hadn't considered how this was affecting Sam. He had been trying to protect his son, but in doing so, he had created a new kind of sadness, a confusion that he couldn't explain away. With simple answers, he realized then that avoiding the problem wasn't solving anything. It was just letting the silence fester and grow into something bigger and more poisonous than the truth itself. The next afternoon, Leo knew what he had to do. He couldn't let the story end like this, with unanswered questions and a sad drawing on the kitchen table. He packed a small bag with the sketchbook and a thermos of hot chocolate and told Sam they were going on an adventure. Sam's eyes lit up with a hope that both warmed and worried Leo. They walked to the park, the familiar path feeling both strange and right. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, a soundtrack to Leo's nervous heartbeat. He didn't go to their usual bench. Instead, he led Sam straight to the gleaming glass tower that had become a symbol of the chasm between his world and Clara's. He had never been inside the building before. The lobby was a vast expanse of polished marble and cold chrome, a silent testament to a world of wealth he couldn't comprehend. A concierge in a sharp uniform looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Leo straightened his shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm here to see Clara Vance." The concierge raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Leo said, his voice steady. "But I think she'll want to see me." The man was about to refuse when a voice cut through the sterile air. "It's all right. I'll take it from here." Clara stood at the top of a sweeping staircase, her face pale but her eyes clear and direct. She had been watching them from the moment they walked in. She had seen them on the security monitor in her apartment. A silent film of a father and son walking with purpose toward her fortress. She had told herself to ignore them, to let the concierge handle it, but she couldn't. She descended the staircase, her movements graceful, but her heart was pounding, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was dressed in a simple silk blouse and tailored-in trousers, a uniform of her world, but her bare feet were a silent rebellion against its constraints. She stopped a few feet from them, her gaze fixed on Leo. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again," she said, her voice a quiet murmur. "I wasn't sure I'd come," Leo admitted, "but my son had something for you." He nodded toward Sam, who stepped forward and held out the sketchbook. Clara knelt down to his level, her eyes softening as she took the sketchbook from his small hands. She flipped through the pages, her fingers tracing the crayon lines of his drawings. She paused on the last one, the picture of the three of them on the Ferris wheel, with her sad smile. Sam pointed to the drawing. "I fixed it," he said proudly. He had taken a yellow crayon and drawn a wide, smiling mouth over the sad one. Clara's breath caught in her throat, a wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled her. She looked up at Leo, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. And in that moment, the marble lobby, the condescending concierge, and the billions of dollars that separated them all faded away. There was just a man, a boy, and a woman with a broken heart that was slowly starting to mend. Clara led them up in a silent glass elevator that offered a dizzying view of the city spreading out below. Sam pressed his face against the glass, his eyes wide with wonder, but Leo couldn't look away from Clara. She stood on the opposite side of the elevator, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze fixed on the sketchbook she held like a precious artifact. Her apartment was even more sterile and vast up close. It was less a home than a museum of modern design, with sleek furniture and abstract art that seemed to mock the very idea of comfort. The only sign of life was a half-finished cup of tea on a marble coffee table and the faint scent of lavender that clung to the air. "It's not very homey," she said as if reading his thoughts. "I never intended to stay this long." Sam was too busy exploring to notice the sterile atmosphere. He discovered a telescope pointed at the park and immediately became engrossed in spying on the ducks. Leo and Clara were left alone in the cavernous living room, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire. "I'm sorry," Leo said finally, breaking the silence. "Sorry for what?" "For how I acted at the fair. I was a jerk. I was surprised, that's all." Clara shook her head. "You had every right to be surprised. I should have told you who I was from the beginning. Why didn't you?" He asked the question gentle but direct. "Because I liked being—" "Just Clara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I liked being the woman in the park who rescued a soccer ball, not the woman on the cover of a business magazine. I was tired of people wanting something from me, of seeing the dollar signs in their eyes. When they looked at me, you didn't look at me like that. You just looked at me." Leo's heart ached with a mixture of regret and a deep-seated understanding. He knew what it was like to be judged, to be put in a box based on appearances. He had lived his whole life on the other side of that judgment. "I get it," he said, and he meant it. They stood there for a long moment, two people from different worlds who had found a common ground in their shared loneliness and their desire for something real, something that couldn't be bought or sold. Then Clara did something that surprised him. She walked over to a sleek entertainment center and pressed a button. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a sound system and a collection of vinyl records. She pulled one out, a classic soul album, and placed it on the turntable. A warm, crackling melody filled the room, chasing away some of the sterile silence. "I haven't played this in years," she said, a small nostalgic smile on her lips. "It reminds me of a time when things were simpler." She turned to him, her eyes soft and vulnerable. "Would you like some hot chocolate? I think I have some real marshmallow somewhere." The offer was so simple, so normal. It was a peace offering, a bridge across the chasm that had opened between them. Leo smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'd love some," he said, and as she disappeared into the kitchen, he knew that this was a new beginning, a chance to rewrite the ending to their story, this time with honesty and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of hope. The hot chocolate was rich and sweet, served in mugs so delicate Leo was afraid to hold them too tightly. Sam sat on the plush white carpet, a small constellation of marshmallow dust on his chin, happily engrossed in a new drawing, this time of the city from Clara's window, the soulful music from the record player wrapped around them. A warm blanket of sound that made the cavernous apartment feel a little smaller, a little more human. Clara sat on the floor, with Sam occasionally offering him a new color or pointing out a particularly interesting building. Leo sat on the edge of a minimalist sofa that was probably worth more than his truck, watching them with a quiet sense of wonder. It was a scene he never could have imagined a few weeks ago. A billionaire heiress, a landscaper, and his son sharing a quiet afternoon in a penthouse apartment. But somehow it felt right. It felt real. After a while, Sam's drawing was finished. He held it up for them to see. It was a chaotic but joyful explosion of color, with a smiling sun and a flock of birds flying over the city. "I'm going to hang this on my fridge," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion, "right next to the one you gave me at the fair." Sam beamed with pride. Then he yawned, a wide jaw-cracking yawn. His head drooped, and he curled up on the carpet using a ridiculously expensive throw pillow as a makeshift bed. Leo smiled and gently scooped his sleeping son into his arms. "I should probably get him home," he said, his voice low. Clara walked them to the door, the sketchbook, and the new drawing tucked under her arm. She paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorknob. "Thank you for coming, Leo," she said, her eyes meeting his over Sam's sleeping form. "Thank you for letting us in," he replied. There was a moment of hesitation, a silent question that hung in the air between them. Then Leo leaned in and gently kissed her cheek. It was a simple, chaste kiss, but it was filled with all the things they hadn't said, the regret, the hope, the fragile promise of a new beginning. Clara's eyes widened in surprise, and a soft blush colored her cheeks. She touched her cheek as he pulled away, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'll see you at the park tomorrow," she said, her voice a little breathless. "Yeah," Leo said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "See you tomorrow." And as he walked down the long, silent hallway with his son sleeping peacefully in his arms, he knew that he was walking toward a future he had never dared to dream of, a future where love could bridge any distance and where a simple act of kindness in a park could change everything. True to their word, they met at the park the next day and the day after that. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by a comfortable ease, a shared understanding that had been forged in the fire of their misunderstanding. They didn't talk about their different worlds anymore. They just lived in the one they had created together, a small pocket of peace and connection in the midst of the bustling city. Clara started spending more time in their world than in her own. She traded her tailored trousers for jeans, her silk blouses for soft sweaters. She learned the names of the other parents at the park. She helped Leo with his landscaping jobs on the weekends, her hands growing calloused and her face tan from the sun. She was a surprisingly hard worker, her movements precise and efficient, even when she was pulling weeds or spreading mulch. Leo watched her with a mixture of awe and amusement. She was a woman of 1,000 contradictions, a billionaire who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, a CEO who could spend an hour patiently teaching his son how to skip a stone across the pond one afternoon. As they were planting a new flower bed for one of Leo's clients, Clara paused, her hands wrist deep in the rich dark soil. She looked up at him, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes were bright and clear. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice serious. "Oh yeah," Leo said, leaning on his shovel. "What about my father wants me to come back to the company? He wants me to take over as CEO." Leo's heart sank. He tried to keep his face neutral, but a cold knot of fear tightened in his stomach. He had known this day would come. He had known that her sabbatical couldn't last forever. "I see," he said, his voice flat. Clara stood up and walked over to him, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I told him no," she said, her gaze steady and unwavering. Leo stared at her in disbelief. "But why? It's your family's company, your legacy." "It's not my life," she said simply. "Not anymore. My life is here with you and Sam. If that's something you want." Leo was speechless. A wave of emotion so powerful it threatened to overwhelm him, washed over him. He had been so afraid of losing her that he had never allowed himself to imagine a future where she would choose him, choose this life over the one she had been born into. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb gently brushing away a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. And then she kissed him, a deep, passionate kiss that was filled with all the love and hope and promise of a future they would build together hand in hand, dirt-smudged and perfectly imperfect. Their life together settled into a beautiful rhythm, a blend of two worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. Clara didn't completely abandon her old life. She used her wealth and her business acumen to make a difference in their community. She started a foundation that funded after-school programs and created community gardens in underserved neighborhoods. She invested in small local businesses, helping them to thrive and grow. But her heart was always in the small, simple moments she spent with Leo and Sam. She loved the quiet evenings they spent in their small apartment, the sound of Sam's laughter filling the rooms. She loved the feel of Leo's hand in hers as they walked through the park, the same park where they had first met. She loved the smell of freshly cut grass and the satisfying ache in her muscles. After a long day of working alongside him in the sun, Leo in turn blossomed under the warmth of her love. He was no longer the cautious, guarded man he had been. He was confident and open, his eyes filled with a light that had been missing for too long. He still worked as a landscaper, but now he owned his own business, a small but thriving company that he had built with Clara's help and encouragement. He was proud of the life they had built together, a life that was rich, not in money, but in love and connection and the simple joy of a shared dream. One sunny afternoon a few years later, they were back at the park, the same bench, the same dappled sunlight, the same feeling of peace and contentment. Sam, now a lanky 10-year-old, was teaching a group of younger kids how to play soccer. His movements confident and his voice filled with the same patient kindness that his father had always shown him. Leo and Clara sat side by side, their fingers intertwined, watching their son with a mixture of pride and love. "Remember the first time we met here?" Clara said, her voice a soft murmur. Leo smiled. "I remember thinking you were the saddest, most beautiful woman I had ever seen." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, "and I remember thinking, you were the kindest man in the world picking up trash that wasn't yours." He chuckled. "Well, I guess we were both right." They sat in comfortable silence for a long time watching their son and the world go by. The glass tower still loomed in the distance, a silent reminder of the world Clara had left behind, but it no longer held any power over them. They had built their own world here in the heart of the park, a world built on love, trust, and the simple belief that a helping hand and an open heart could bridge any distance as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Leo turned to Clara and said, "I love you." His voice was quiet, but filled with a certainty that echoed in the deepest chambers of his heart. "I love you too," she replied, and as they sealed their words with a kiss, they knew that they had found their forever, in the most unexpected of places, in a simple act of kindness, in a shared smile, in a love story that had been written in the language of the heart. The park had become their sanctuary, a living testament to their unlikely love story. The seasons changed, painting the landscape in different hues, but the essence of the place remained the same, a haven of peace and connection in the heart of the bustling city. Their little family had grown too. A baby girl with Clara's dark hair and Leo's clear blue eyes now gurgled happily in a stroller beside their bench, her laughter, a new melody in the symphony of their lives. Sam was a doting older brother, always ready with a silly face or a gentle pat on the head. He had grown into a thoughtful and compassionate young man, his father's son in every way that mattered. Leo's landscaping business had expanded beyond his wildest dreams. He now had a small crew of employees and a long list of loyal clients who valued his honesty and his artistry as much as his skill with a hedge trimmer. He was respected in the community, a man who had built a successful business from the ground, up with integrity and hard work. Clara had found her own kind of success too, not in the boardrooms and balance sheets of her old life, but in the tangible difference she was making in the world. Her foundation had become a powerful force for good, transforming neglected neighborhoods into vibrant community spaces. She was a hands-on philanthropist, often seen with a shovel in her hand and dirt on her cheek, working alongside the very people she was helping. She had found a purpose that was more fulfilling than any stock portfolio or corporate merger. But their greatest joy was in the simple, ordinary moments of their life together. The lazy Sunday mornings spent in their sun-drenched kitchen, the raucous family dinners filled with laughter and spilled milk, the quiet evenings spent on the porch watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. They were a testament to the fact that love could flourish in the most unexpected of circumstances, that two people from vastly different worlds could find a common ground and build a life that was richer and more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. On their anniversary, they returned to the park bench where their story had begun. The glass tower still stood in the distance, a silent monument to a life Clara had left behind, but it no longer seemed imposing or cold. It was just a part of the landscape, a backdrop to the beautiful, vibrant life they had built together in its shadow. They watched their children play, their laughter echoing in the evening air. Leo reached for Clara's hand, his touch familiar and comforting. "I was thinking about that first day," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The day you rescued Sam's soccer ball." Clara smiled. I was thinking about the man who was picking up other people's trash. He squeezed her hand. I'm glad you came down from your tower that day. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Me too, she said, her voice filled with a deep and abiding love. Me too, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and red. They sat in silence, content, in the knowledge that their love story was far from over. It was a story that would continue to unfold in the everyday moments of their life, a story of love loss and the redemptive power of a second chance, a story that had begun with a simple act of kindness in a park and had blossomed into a love that was as enduring and as beautiful as the ancient trees that watched over them. Their story became a quiet legend in the city, a modern-day fairy tale whispered among the regulars at the local diner and the parents at the park. They were the billionaire and the gardener, the woman who gave up a kingdom for a man with a kind heart and calloused hands. But to Leo and Clara, their story was much simpler. It was about finding a home in the most unexpected of places. In each other's arms, they continued to build their life together, their love, a steady anchor in the ever-changing tides of the world. Their children grew up knowing the value of both hard work and a compassionate heart. They learned to appreciate the beauty of a well-tended garden and the power of a well-funded community center. They were a beautiful blend of their parents' two worlds, grounded and generous, kind and ambitious. Leo's business flourished, becoming a model of sustainable and ethical landscaping. He taught workshops on urban gardening and composting, sharing his knowledge and his passion with the community. He was no longer just a gardener. He was a leader, a mentor, a man who was making the world a more beautiful place. One flower bed at a time, Clara's foundation expanded its reach. Tackling bigger and more complex social issues, she became a respected voice in the world of philanthropy, known for her innovative and effective approach to social change. But she never lost sight of the importance of small individual acts of kindness. She still volunteered at the local soup kitchen and tutored kids in the after-school program she had funded. She was a woman who walked her talk, who lived her values every single day. Their home was a warm and welcoming haven, a place where friends and family gathered for lively dinners and lazy Sunday brunches. It was a home filled with laughter, love, and the happy chaos of a life well lived. The sterile silence of Clara's penthouse was a distant memory replaced by the rich and vibrant soundtrack of their shared life on a warm summer evening. Years later, they sat on their porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold. Their children, now teenagers, were playing a boisterous game of badminton in the yard. Their laughter mingling with the chirp of the crickets. Leo reached for Clara's hand, his touch still sending a jolt of warmth through her. "After all these years, you know," he said, his voice a low, gentle murmur, "I still can't believe you chose this, chose me." Clara turned to him, her eyes soft with a love that had only deepened with time. There was never any other choice. She said simply, "You were always the one." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, a diamond-dusted canopy that stretched above them. Their love story was a testament to the transformative power of kindness, the enduring strength of the human heart, and the simple truth that true wealth is not measured in dollars and cents, but in the richness of the love we give and receive. And as they watched their children, their legacy of love and kindness, dance in the twilight, they knew that they had created a life that was more beautiful and more meaningful than any fairy tale. The years rolled on like the gentle turning of the seasons, each one bringing new joys, new challenges, and a deepening of the love that had become the bedrock of their lives. Their children grew and flourished, each a unique reflection of the two worlds that had come together to create them. Sam went off to college to study environmental science, his passion for the natural world a direct inheritance from his father. He had Leo's quiet strength and Clara's sharp intellect, a combination that made him a force to be reckoned with. Their daughter. Mia developed a passion for social justice. Her heart as big and as generous as her mother's, she spent her summers volunteering for Clara's foundation. Her empathy and her determination, a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed dark and cynical. Leo and Clara watched them go with a mixture of pride and a gentle melancholy. Their home was quieter now, the boisterous energy of their children replaced by a peaceful contentment. They had more time for each other now, more time for the quiet moments of connection that had always been the heart of their relationship. They traveled together, exploring the world with the same sense of wonder and curiosity that they had brought to their first encounters in the park. They hiked through lush rainforests, sailed on turquoise seas, and wandered through ancient cities, their hands always intertwined, a silent testament to their enduring bond, but their favorite place was still their own backyard. The small patch of green where they had built their life together, they would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the fireflies and reminiscing about the old days. They would laugh about the time Clara had tried to fix the lawnmower and had ended up covered in oil. They would talk about the first time they had met, the way the universe had conspired to bring two lonely souls together, in the most unlikely of circumstances. On their 30th anniversary, Sam and Mia threw them a surprise party in the park, the very park where their story had begun. Friends and family gathered from all over the world, a testament to the many lives they had touched with their kindness and their love. There were speeches and toasts, and a slideshow of photos that chronicled their incredible journey from a chance encounter to a lifetime of love. As the sun began to set, Leo and Clara slipped away from the party and walked to their bench. The same bench where they had shared their first sandwich so many years ago. The glass tower still stood in the distance, a silent witness to their enduring love story. "Look at us," Clara said, her voice soft with emotion. "Still here after all this time," Leo smiled and pulled her close. "Still picking up trash," he said with a wink. They laughed. A sound that was filled with the warmth and the wisdom of a love that had stood the test of time as they sat there, hand in hand, watching the stars come out. They knew that their love was a legacy, a gift that they would pass on to their children and their children's children. A story that would be told for generations to come, a story of a billionaire and a gardener who had found their forever in a simple act of kindness, in a shared dream, in a love that was as real and as beautiful as the park that had brought them together. One crisp autumn afternoon, an elderly Leo sat on the park bench, his hands resting on a worn wooden cane. His hair was silver now, and his face was a roadmap of a life well lived, but his eyes still held the same kind, gentle light that had first captured Clara's heart so many years ago. He watched as a young couple argued near the trash can, their voices sharp and angry. They tossed a fast food bag onto the ground and stormed off in opposite directions, leaving a trail of litter and resentment in their wake. Leo sighed a familiar ache in his chest. Some things never changed. He slowly pushed himself to his feet. His old bones protesting with a groan, he began to make his way toward the mess. His movement slow but steady, just as he reached for the first piece of trash. A small hand slipped into his. He looked down to see his granddaughter, a little girl with Clara's dark curls and his own bright blue eyes. "What are you doing, Grandpa?" she asked, her voice a sweet melody. "Grandpa's just leaving the place a little better than we found it," he said, his voice raspy with age. "It's not our mess," she said, her brow furrowed in confusion. Leo smiled a slow, sad smile. "It doesn't matter," he said. "It's our park though, right?" As he bent down to pick up a crushed soda can, a shadow fell over them. He looked up to see a young woman standing there, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. She was dressed in a sharp business suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, a silent observer in a world she didn't seem to belong to. "Excuse me," she said, her voice polite but distant. "I saw what you were doing. I just wanted to say that's a very kind thing to do." Leo looked at her, and for a moment he was transported back in time to another afternoon, another park, another woman with sad eyes and a lonely heart. He smiled a genuine smile that seemed to erase the years from his face. "Well," he said, his voice filled with a gentle wisdom, "sometimes a simple act of kindness can change a life." The young woman looked at him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, a question, a longing, a hope. He didn't know her story. He didn't need to. He just knew that the world was full of lonely souls waiting for a helping hand, a kind word, a rescued soccer ball, and as he and his granddaughter continued to clean up the trash together, he knew that the legacy of his love story with Clara was still alive, still working its quiet magic in the heart of the park. A timeless reminder that love and kindness are the most powerful forces in the universe. The story of Leo and Clara became a cherished piece of local lore, a reminder that magic could be found in the most ordinary of places. Their children and grandchildren continued to be stewards of the park and the community, embodying the values of kindness and integrity. Their parents had instilled in them the landscaping business Leo had started, thrived under Sam's leadership, becoming a national example of sustainable and community-focused enterprise. Mia followed in her mother's footsteps, taking the helm of the foundation and expanding its work to a global scale. Yet she always remained grounded in the grassroots principles her mother had championed. The park itself underwent a quiet transformation. Over the years, the community garden Clara had funded blossomed into a vibrant hub of activity where neighbors gathered to cultivate not just plants but friendships. The playground was updated with imaginative equipment that sparked the creativity of a new generation of children, and the old wooden bench where Leo and Clara had first shared a sandwich was preserved and dedicated with a small bronze plaque that read, "For Leo and Clara, who taught us that the greatest treasures are not found in what we have, but in what we give away." Visitors to the park would often pause to read the plaque, and some would learn the story behind it from the older residents who remembered the billionaire and the gardener. Their tale served as a gentle counter-narrative to the city's usual stories of power and ambition. It was a story about a different kind of wealth, one measured in compassion and connection. The glass tower, where Clara had once lived in isolation, was eventually repurposed into a center for arts and education, a space that now fostered the very community and creativity she had once felt so disconnected from. It was a fitting evolution, a symbol of how her own journey had come full circle from a place of solitude to a source of inspiration for countless others. Even after they were gone, the spirit of Leo and Clara lingered in the rustle of the leaves, in the laughter of children playing, and in the quiet acts of kindness that continued to ripple through the community they had nurtured. Their love story was not just about two individuals. It had become the story of the park itself, a living legacy, proving that a single moment of seeing another person's humanity could plant a seed of love capable of growing into a forest of good that would shelter generations to come. Decades later, a young journalist named Maya arrived in the city tasked with finding a story that captured its true heart. She was tired of the usual narratives of corporate titans and political dramas. She was looking for something with soul, something real. She stumbled upon the park by chance, drawn in by its peaceful atmosphere and the vibrant community she saw there. She spent days interviewing people, a young mother tending to her plot in the community garden, an old man playing chess, a group of teenagers volunteering to repaint the benches. Each person she spoke to had a story, and all the stories seemed to orbit around a central theme of kindness and shared responsibility. Eventually, an elderly woman pointed her toward the small bronze plaque on the bench. Maya read the names Leo and Clara, and a question sparked within her: who were they? The woman smiled a knowing, gentle smile. "That's not just a story," she said. "It's the story of this place." Intrigued, Maya began to dig. She spent weeks in the city archives and the local library, piecing together the details. She found the old news articles about the missing billionaire heiress, and the flurry of speculation. She found the announcement of the foundation, the quiet investments in the community, She found wedding announcements and birth notices, building a timeline of a life lived with quiet purpose. The more she learned, the more captivated she became. This wasn't just a feel-good human interest piece, it was a profound story about love, choice, and the radical act of defying expectations. She found Leo and Clara's children, Sam and Mia, who were now respected leaders in their own right. They were hesitant at first to share their parents' private story, but they saw the sincerity in Maya's eyes. They shared old photographs, faded letters, and personal anecdotes, painting a vivid picture of a love that was both extraordinary and deeply relatable. Maya's article, when it was finally published, went viral. It resonated with people across the globe who were hungry for a story of hope and genuine connection. It was translated into dozens of languages and shared millions of times. The story of the gardener and the billionaire became a global phenomenon, a modern parable for a world weary of cynicism. It inspired people to look for the good in others, to perform their own small acts of kindness, to believe that love could indeed bridge any divide. The park became an unofficial landmark, a place of pilgrimage for those who had been touched by the story. People left flowers on the bench, shared their own stories of kindness on a community board, and simply sat in the space. Feeling the palpable sense of love that had been cultivated there for so long, the story of Leo and Clara had transcended its origins. It no longer belonged just to them or to the park. It had become a part of the collective human story, a timeless testament to the idea that the most powerful legacy one can leave is not an empire of wealth, but a garden of kindness that continues to grow and nourish the world long after you're gone. The enduring impact of Leo and Clara's story prompted the city to establish an annual Kindness Day held in the park every autumn. It was a day of celebration and service, a time for the community to come together to honor the legacy of the two people who had so profoundly shaped its identity. The festival was a beautiful reflection of their life together. There were landscaping workshops led by Sam's company, where families learned to plant their own gardens. There were booths run by Mia's foundation, showcasing the work of local nonprofits, and there were storytelling sessions where people shared their own experiences of giving and receiving kindness. The highlight of the day was the annual Trash to Treasure art contest, where children were encouraged to create sculptures and collages from recycled materials. A playful nod to the simple act that had started it all, the entire park buzzed with a joyful, positive energy, a living embodiment of the world Leo and Clara had built together, a world where everyone felt seen, valued, and connected. One year, an elderly Sam and Mia stood on a small stage to address the crowd. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the park, the same light that had illuminated their parents' first meeting so many years ago. Our parents' story is often told as a fairy tale, Sam said, his voice thick with emotion, but the truth is it was never about a princess and a pauper. It was about two people who were brave enough to be vulnerable, who chose connection over comfort, who understood that real strength lies in our ability to care for one another. Mia added her voice clear and strong. They taught us that every single one of us has the power to change the world with a single act of kindness. You don't have to be a billionaire to make a difference. You just have to be willing to see the person in front of you, to offer a hand to leave the world a little better than you found it. As they spoke, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old trees that stood sentinel over the park. It was as if Leo and Clara were there with them, their spirits woven into the very fabric of the place they loved, their legacy. Not a static monument, but a living, breathing force that continued to inspire and uplift. The story had become a self-perpetuating cycle of good deeds. Each act of kindness planting the seed for the next, creating a ripple effect that spread far beyond the borders of the small city park. It was a testament to the simple but profound truth that had been at the heart of Leo and Clara's love story from the very beginning. The most valuable thing we can build in this life is a community of care, a world where everyone belongs and where a simple act of picking up someone else's trash can be the beginning of the most beautiful love story imaginable. Years turned into a generation, and the park remained the city's heart. The story of Leo and Clara was now taught in local schools, a foundational piece of the city's identity. Children learned about the gardener and the heiress not as characters in a romance, but as exemplars of civic virtue and emotional courage. The annual Kindness Day had grown into a week-long event drawing people from all over the world who wanted to experience the unique spirit of the community. The foundation Mia had led was now a global entity run by her own children, but it never lost its connection to the small park where its mission was born. It operated on the principle of the Clara method, a strategy that prioritized grassroots investment and empowering local leaders over top-down directives. Leo's landscaping company, under the guidance of Sam's children, had pioneered new techniques in urban ecology and green design, transforming cityscapes around the globe. But its headquarters remained in the same small building where Leo had first started his business, a humble reminder of its origins in hard work and a deep love for the earth. The park bench, with its bronze plaque, was now protected under a small, elegant gazebo, a quiet space for reflection. People from all walks of life would sit there, leaving small tokens, a flower, a painted stone, a handwritten note, sharing how the story had impacted them. It had become a place of solace and inspiration, a touchstone for those seeking to reconnect with their own humanity. One day, a young filmmaker, deeply moved by the story, decided to make a documentary about Leo and Clara's legacy. She spent a year in the city interviewing the last few people who had known them personally and capturing the enduring impact of their lives on the community. The film was a quiet, meditative piece that avoided sensationalism, focusing instead on the small, everyday acts of kindness that defined the city's culture. It ended with a shot of the park bench at sunset, the plaque gleaming in the golden light as a young father knelt to help his son pick up a piece of litter. The film won numerous awards at international festivals, not for its dramatic flair, but for its profound and gentle message. It reminded a global audience that true heroism is not about grand gestures, but about the consistent, quiet choice to be kind, to be present, and to love. Without condition, the story of Leo and Clara had become more than just a local legend or a viral article. It had been canonized as a timeless piece of art, a story that would continue to inspire and guide humanity for generations to come. A beacon of hope in a world that so often felt divided and dark. A simple, beautiful testament to the enduring power of love. The final scene of the documentary lingered on the park bench. Empty now as the last rays of sunlight faded, a soft voiceover began, not the filmmakers, but a recording of an elderly Mia speaking, her voice filled with a lifetime of love and wisdom. "People always ask me what the secret was," she said. "What made their love so strong, so enduring, and I always tell them the same thing. It wasn't a secret. It was a choice. My mother chose to see a man, not his circumstances. My father chose to see a woman, not her wealth. They chose honesty when it was hard. They chose vulnerability when it was terrifying. They chose each other every single day." The camera slowly panned across the park, now bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The community garden, the playground, the gazebo, all silent and peaceful. The world my parents built wasn't a fantasy. Mia's voice continued. It was a commitment, a daily practice of seeing the best in each other and in the world around them. They knew that life would be messy, that there would be struggles and heartaches. But they also knew that as long as they had each other, as long as they led with kindness, they could face anything. Their legacy isn't the money or the buildings. It's the feeling you get when you walk through this park. It's the instinct to help a stranger, the courage to be open-hearted, the simple belief that we are all connected. The final shot was of the bronze plaque on the bench, the words catching the last bit of light. For Leo and Clara, who taught us that the greatest treasures are not found in what we have, but in what we give away, the screen faded to black, leaving the audience with a profound sense of peace and a renewed faith in the power of the human heart. The story had come to a close, but the legacy it left behind was infinite, a ripple of kindness that would continue to spread through the world, a timeless love story that would forever be etched in the heart of a grateful city, and in the souls of all who heard it. And so the park thrived, a living monument not of stone or steel, but of human connection. The bench became a quiet focal point, a place where people would sit and reflect on the story that had become the city's soul. The tale of Leo and Clara was no longer just about them. It was about the potential within everyone to bridge divides and find common ground. It was a story that encouraged a corporate lawyer to volunteer at a homeless shelter, a teenager to start a cleanup initiative in their neighborhood, a wealthy benefactor to anonymously fund a scholarship for underprivileged students. The ripple effect was immeasurable, a cascade of goodwill that emanated from that single point of origin, a man picking up trash, and a woman who dared to see him. A university even established a new field of study, societal kinetics inspired by the story, exploring how small acts of interpersonal kindness can create large-scale social and economic change. Theses and dissertations were written about the park effect, analyzing the tangible metrics of a community that prioritized empathy over profit. The city's crime rates were among the lowest in the nation, its public school graduation rates the highest. Its residents reported a level of life satisfaction that baffled sociologists and economists who couldn't fit the data into their traditional models. What they failed to account for was the unquantifiable variable of a shared narrative of hope. A story that had been so deeply integrated into the cultural DNA of the place that it informed everything from public policy to daily interactions at the grocery store. Children grew up with the story as their foundational myth. It taught them that a person's worth wasn't determined by their bank account or their job title, but by the content of their character and the kindness in their heart. It was a simple, powerful lesson that shaped them into a generation of compassionate and engaged citizens. The world outside the city continued its tumultuous churn of politics and conflict. But within the bubble of the community nurtured by Leo and Clara's legacy, there was a palpable sense of peace, a quiet resilience that came from a deep-seated belief in the goodness of humanity. The story had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. By believing in the power of kindness, the community had manifested it in their reality. Their love had become a blueprint for a better way to live, a more connected and compassionate way to be human. And as the seasons continued to turn and new generations discovered the story, for the first time, the love of the gardener and the billionaire proved to be the most sustainable and valuable resource the city had ever known. A treasure that would never be depleted, a legacy that would truly last forever. The park at dusk held a certain magic. The air grew cool, and the sounds of the city softened into a distant hum. It was a time of transition, a pause between the day's labor and the night's rest. On one such evening, a young boy sat on the famous bench, his small shoulders slumped in defeat. His new kite, a vibrant splash of color against the green grass, lay tangled and torn at his feet. He had been trying for hours to get it to fly, but the wind had been fickle, and a sudden gust had sent it crashing into the branches of an old oak tree. He had managed to retrieve it, but its delicate frame was broken, and its spirit seemed to be as well. Tears of frustration welled in his eyes as he stared at the broken toy. A woman who had been walking her dog nearby noticed the boy's distress. She was new to the city, a high-powered executive transferred to a new branch of her firm, and she was still finding her footing in this strangely earnest town. She hesitated for a moment, her city instincts telling her not to get involved, not to intrude, but then she remembered the stories she had heard about this park, about the ethos of the community. She took a deep breath and approached the boy. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice gentle. The boy looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "My kite," he mumbled. "It's broken. It'll never fly again." The woman knelt down and examined the kite. Its wooden spine was snapped, and a long tear ran through its nylon skin. It looked hopeless, but she saw the boy's heartbroken expression and felt a pang of empathy. "I'm not sure about that," she said with a confidence she didn't feel my grandfather used to say, that sometimes things have to break a little before they can learn to fly higher. She took a small roll of tape from her purse and a pocket knife from her keychain with surprising dexterity. She began to mend the broken kite. She splinted the wooden frame with a twig and carefully taped the torn fabric. The boy watched her, his eyes wide with a mixture of skepticism and hope. When she was finished, the kite was a patchwork of its former self, scarred but whole. "Now," she said, standing up, "let's see if we can't convince the wind to cooperate." They walked to the open field, and the woman showed the boy how to hold the kite, how to feel the pull of the wind, how to let go at just the right moment. They ran together, their laughter mingling in the evening air, and on the third try, the kite caught a current and soared into the sky, its patchwork tail dancing in the wind. The boy cheered, his earlier despair forgotten. In the pure joy of flight, he turned to the woman and threw his arms around her waist. "Thank you," he said. His voice muffled against her coat. The woman hugged him back, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the setting sun. She looked across the park at the bench with its small bronze plaque, and she finally understood the magic of this place. It wasn't in a fairy tale or a legend. It was in the simple human choice to stop to help, to mend what was broken, and to believe in the possibility of flight. Even when the odds seemed impossible, she had come to the city for a job, but she realized in that moment that she had found something much more valuable. She had found a home.